Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Caroline, and I love talking about books. Today, I have a complete guide to fantasy for you all. These are all the book recommendations in the fantasy genres, and I broke the fantasy genres down into different subcategories: epic fantasy / high fantasy, cozy fantasy, romantic fantasy, meaning fantasy with a romantic subplot or multiple mini plots, or a romantasy, which is everybody's favorite at this point. But I feel like fantasy doesn't just include romantasy. For the past couple of months, I've been on such a fantasy kick. I've been reading lots of fantasy books, dabbling my feet into lots of different subcategories in fantasy, such as epic high fantasy. Also, Grimdark Fantasy is something that I'm also intrigued by. So I thought I'm gonna do this like cohesive, conclusive guide to fantasy in case you also have been thinking of getting into fantasy but you don't know where to start. And this is all the books I think you should read if you're a fantasy beginner. Also, I'm going to be talking about some of the books I do want to read next in these subcategories because I do want to read more from them, and I would love to explore more deeper into these subgenres of fantasy. So without further ado, let's get straight into the video. So like I mentioned, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about epic high fantasy, cozy fantasy, romantic fantasy, that's fantasy with a subplot, and then romantasy, which I'm gonna be leaving to the last because I feel like that's why you have to watch to the end of the video, okay? So let's talk about epic high fantasy first. I'm gonna first start off by defining the subgenre just to give an idea of what it means and what does epic high fantasy entail. So according to Google, epic high fantasy is a subgenre of fantasy literature set in a completely fictional world that features immense stakes, usually involve a battle between good and evil, the fate of civilization, or the salvation of the world. It is defined by the epic nature of its setting, or by the epic stature of its characters, themes, or plot. With this, I have read a couple epic high fantasy, and usually these are like bigger fantasy, bigger series, bigger world, bigger stakes, things like that. That's how I usually think when I talk about epic high fantasy. The first one I think you should definitely read is The Priory of the Orange Tree and the entire series by Samantha Shannon. I recently dabbled my feet at the end of 2025 into The Priory of the Orange Tree, and I know before you say anything, those books are gigantic. I think the first book is like 800 pages, and then the second book, which I just finished, was like 900 pages. But then the third book came out at the end of 2025, so it is officially a completed trilogy. And the third book is somewhere, I think, 400 pages, so it's a lot shorter than the first two books. The order that you're going to be reading this series as a whole in will be The Priory of the Orange Tree, which is the first book, and then you're going to be reading A Day of Fallen Night. And this is a prequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree, but I do recommend you reading this book second, just because I also, when I was reading the second book, A Day of Fallen Night, I was doubting Samantha Shannon a little bit because I came in not knowing what to expect because I already knew what's going to happen from reading book one, but then it surprised me, made me realize that you need to read the books in these orders. And then the last book that came out at the end of 2025 was Among the Burning Flowers, and like I mentioned, that was like very short and sweet, and I'm very intrigued to see what else can we know about this world that we already don't know from the first two books, because those books are gigantic. It's like a tome. They are actually, but I really enjoy reading both of them. I think I gave The Priory of the Orange Tree, I think 4.5 stars, I want to say, and then A Day of Fallen Night was like 4.25 to 4.5 star. I can't remember. I'm going to be leaving the ratings on the screen for you. This is a series about very, very intense political tension between the different parts of this world. So we have the South, East, the West, and the North. Each part in this world follows a very distinct religious belief, or at least their mindsets and their beliefs and their morals are very different compared to the other parts of the world. In the West, we're talking about the West, we have the Queendom of Innis. And this queendom, they believe that they are very important because the existence of this entire line of queens of this kingdom is the sole reason why the Nameless One, which is this powerful evil deity, I want to say it's more of a wyvern more than a dragon. I know they do get confused sometimes, but this wyvern that's very, very evil, malicious, and it causes something called the plague. And the red plague is very infectious and it causes people to go mad, to go absolutely insane, things like that. And the West, they believe that because the lines of the queens in this kingdom still stand, that's why the Nameless One cannot resurrect, cannot retaliate, cannot revitalize, basically. So it's more of a inverse relationship. If one lives, the other dies, and vice versa. Whereas in the South, where the Priory of the Orange Tree is located, they believe that they have the weapon to fight against the Nameless One. So they don't buy into the belief that this queendom has to live and has to stand, has to survive, so that the Nameless One can, just like lay in the ground and not be resurrected. They do believe that the Nameless One will come back eventually. So instead of trying to deny its existence, they're like kind of honing themselves and training their magic and their skills and their strengths so that when the Nameless One resurrect, they can fight against the Nameless One. And they have the orange trees, and the orange trees are magical trees that can gift the members of this priory with magical powers and flames and things like that. The East is a different story. In the East we have dragons. Because we have dragons, we have dragon riders. And so the dragon riders, once again, they don't deny the existence of the Nameless One. Because they have the dragons, they train their citizens, their dragon riders, so that they could use the dragons to fight the Nameless Ones. The East doesn't like the West, and the West doesn't like the East. The West, where this queendom lies, they think that the dragons are very similar to wyverns, and they look very similar, but they're completely different. But they don't know that. They thought that the dragons and the wyverns are equally as evil and equally as malicious. So they don't like the East. They don't like trading with them, they hate them, they openly deflect them, they don't like them, they don't tolerate the Eastern people, right? The East, because they know that the West think that their dragons are equivalent to the wyverns, they also don't like the West. Because to the Eastern people, their dragons are basically their god. So the West kind of like criticizing, insulting, looking down upon their gods means that they also look down upon the Eastern people. So that's why you see like all these like political tensions playing out. And I do want to say that the first book, at least the first like 20% of the Priory of Entry will be a bit hard to wrap your heads around just because there's a lot of going on and it's a multi-POV, so you're going to be introduced to lots of different people from different parts of the world, and their upbringing, their way of life, and their thoughts and their mindsets are very different from each other. But somehow Samantha Shannon is such a mastermind in that she lays down all the puzzle pieces, and then without us knowing anything, all the puzzles, they fit together, and all of these people, no matter how different they are, there are some sort of like connected, there's some like webs that lead them to each other. They're entangled in very, very unique and very, very complex ways that you didn't even see coming until you read the last 100 pages of the books. And so that is what I mean when I said epic. The scope of everything, the political intrigue, how intricate, just like lots of layers to this entire story you're going to be familiarizing yourself with. And also her writing style is very beautiful. It's full of prose, it's very descriptive. It truly feels like you're in this world, and her writing style matches the aesthetics of this world. It's very flowy, it's very like that, but it's also very, very subtle and nuanced. So that's the Priory of the Orange Tree. And then A Day of Hollow Night, we follow a completely different set of characters that happened before the events of the Priory Orange Tree happened. And the second book, even though it's a prequel, it is a second book like I mentioned, and it's gonna help explain the events in book one in a more in-depth and just like chronological way. I came into reading A Day of Hollow Night not having expectations because I thought I already knew everything that's gonna happen, so what's the point? But truly, as it turns out, Samantha Shannon will explain things that in a truly impactful way. And after reading book 2, you're gonna understand the events of book 1 to like tremendous heights and depth, and it's just gonna be like such a surreal experience for you to be reading this entire trilogy. I still haven't finished the series. I have book 3 left, but I know it's gonna be up there as one of my favorite all-time series ever. The next epic high fantasy series slash book that I do recommend is Malice by John Gwynne, or The Faithful of the Fallen series by John Gwynne. I only read book 1. Somebody at my local library has been reading that book, the second book, for like the past couple of months. I'm like in line, but I put it on hold. I never got notified when it's available. So at this point, I'm thinking of just reading it on my like ebooks instead of just reading it physically. This entire series is like very epic. It's packed with battles, but it's very different from the Priory of the Orange Tree, whereas this world is a very brutal world. The war is brewing, everybody is getting ready to fight. We follow Corbin. He's just a kid. You know, we opened up the book knowing how young he is, and also knowing how he desired to become a soldier and a knight. And so we follow him for the majority of book 1 on his journey of training to become a knight and just a soldier, and like helping to fight against what is good and what is evil. This is a story about also betrayal, of having to forsake your own hometown because you're forced to. People at the top forcing people at the bottom to just like obey, and if they don't, exile them. So that's exactly what happened with Corbin and his family. He also had a wolf pet of some sort, so because of that, he's also discriminated against by the people in his community because they don't like wolves. And I think in this world, the wolves and the humans, they don't tolerate each other. They kill one another, right? So the wolves, they don't like the humans because the humans kill the cubs, but then the humans don't like the wolves because the wolves killed the humans. We follow Corbin on his journey of courage, knowledge, of strength, of found family, of friendship, and just everything that is going on in his life. And I feel so much for this character because of how young he is and how many burdens he had to carry at such a young age. But above all, I admire his courage. I admire his grounded beliefs in knowing that he has to fight for what is right and against what is wrong. And I'm excited to see what his journey entails. And like I mentioned, I only read book 1 and I have 3 more books to finish, but this is a completed series, so you're gonna be in for a ride. And if you already read book 1 and ready to be reading book 2, let me know so that we can buddy read this book together. My last recommendation for epic high fantasy will be the First Law Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. And this is slightly different from the other 2 books because this is Grimdark Fantasy. So this is even more brutal and more raw and more graphic than the other 2 books. I feel like I unintentionally put all of these books in like increasing levels of brutality and just violence as you go on. But I feel like between Malice and the First Law Trilogy, the way that these authors write battle scenes are very different from each other. I actually prefer the writing style of Joe Abercrombie than John Gwynne, especially for battle scenes. I feel like Joe Abercrombie writes his battle scenes very well. Like the pacing is very on point, and it also doesn't bore me because sometimes for battle scenes, you knew what's going on, like people killing each other, somebody gets injured and somebody, you know, gather the strength and then fights back and then that person wins, things like that. So all the normal motifs of what a battle entails, you already know. Like we are all very familiar, you know, growing up watching action movies and things like that. But somehow Joe Abercrombie still was able to surprise me and like really hooked me in. Every single one of his battle scenes, like the way he writes and the way that his characters moves, it's very predictable, but at the same time unpredictable. And so because of that, I never knew what each battle scene would look like, and every single scene in terms of like action and fighting and violence is very different from each other, so you never know who's gonna win, what's gonna happen, what plot twists are gonna come. So because of that, I really enjoyed reading his battle scenes, whereas in John Gwynne and in Malice in particular, the battle scenes fall more on like being predictable, like too predictable at some point, and there's not like many sudden or surprise plot twists like Corbin is gonna win every single time, things like that. So knowing that, I found myself skimming through the battle scenes more in Malice. Sometimes it, kind of zoned me out of Malice. But that being said, the First Law trilogy, once again, is a war story. And this war story is very dark. It's a grimdark fantasy, so do check the true warnings. It's very brutal. It follows a bunch of different characters. I feel like I cannot do this book's justice just because of how complex it is. I'm like trying to think of what and how to kind of summarize these books and this trilogy in just a couple of sentences, but I don't think I can. But my favorite character so far, and I feel like everybody's favorite character is the same, is Glokta. And he is this like inquisitor, I want to say. He tortures people for a living, and he also used to be tortured by the enemy as well. We followed a bunch of characters, like I mentioned. We followed a knight who is fighting to become a knight. We followed Glokta, which is an inquisitor, a torturer. We also follow a bunch of different Northmen from the north on their journey of like fighting, because there's this like king that is rising in power in the north. He apparently is a very evil person. He tortures people. And so because of that, this group of Northmen, they don't like how this king is behaving and how brutal and how evil and how malicious he is. They willingly exile themselves from his army, and so they went down to the council. And so the council is a different country, and this is where Glokta resides, and this is where he tortures people, and this is also where the knight who is training to become a soldier also lives in. And somehow, once again, it's very interesting how these people are very different from each other, and somehow they find themselves entangled fighting for the same purpose, which is fighting against this evil king that's brewing and that's rising up in power in the north. I do want to say that the representation of women and females in this book is not to my liking. And I think it's intentional. It's not like Joe Abercrombie cannot write about a woman. I think if he wants to, he could write beautiful female characters with such strength and background story that truly can surprise you. But I think the reason why he depicted the woman in his book, in this series, the way that he did was very intentional to add to that like brutality and violence and this injustice and prejudices that's going on in this entire world. But because of that, you're not going to feel comfortable reading about the female protagonists and the female characters in this book. They are very vicious beings, and they don't fall under the normal like stereotypical like female stereotypes that you usually see in fantasy. They're very, very different. But reading about them and the way that they act and they behave, the way that they tend to isolate themselves because they are used to be on their own, like surviving alone, truly makes you question about how women are supposed to be treated and how this system and this world and this society is built to treat women that way intentionally. I really enjoyed reading the First Law trilogy by Abercrombie. I have 3 other standalones that I do want to read, and the standalones are part of this universe. It's not part of the core trilogy, but it's part of the world and this entire like society. So I'm very, very intrigued to read more by Joe Abercrombie. I also read The Devils by him. That book was chef kiss. Once again, his character work is so distinct that you will know who is talking just by like the first sentence or the first dialogue. They're so distinctive from each other. They're so unique, and it's just like amazing to see that level of character work as such an epic scope. In terms of the books I want to read next in this high fantasy, epic fantasy subcategory, I do want to continue reading more from John Gwynne. I do want to finish the Faithful and the Fallen series, the other 3 books. And then I also want to read, I think, the other series that he has, like the Blood of the Gods, the Fury of the God, things like that. I do want to finish that series as well. The goal of 2026 for me is also to start diving into Robin Hobb's Realm of the Otherlings. I know it's a 16 books universe. I'm very, very intrigued. Sometimes you just need to be in the same world as your favorite characters for as long as possible. And because of that, I feel like reading epic high fantasy is so suitable if you are feeling that way, because you're going to be spending a lot of times in the world with your characters, and also you're going to be spending a lot of time doing character analysis and just like trying to figure out what's going on in this world. So Robin Hobb, I do want to finish the first 3 books, the first trilogy, I think. And then the other thing that I do want to finish, or at least attempt to finish, is Lords of the Ring, at least the first trilogy. I'm very late to the game. I haven't finished all of the Lords of the Rings movies. I also haven't read any of the books of Lords of the Rings trilogy. I was debating watching and finishing the movie adaptations first, but then I saw somebody on TikTok suggesting that I should read the books first before I finish the film. So that's, I think, what I'm gonna do. So that's epic high fantasy. The next category I do want to talk about is cozy fantasy. And cozy fantasy is a subgenre of fantasy that emphasizes on low stakes, comforting, and heartwarming stories over epic battles or complex plots or political tension, things like that. This is perfect for if you're in a mood for something very, very cozy, but also something that's very comforting, comfort reads, things like that, especially during the fall when it's like colder outside, the leaves are changing, things like that. You need some sort of that nostalgia, or reading something that you know you're gonna enjoy and you know that's gonna fulfill your heart and your soul. These are the books for you. The first one that I do want to recommend, as always, I'm never gonna be shutting up about this duology. This is T.J. Klune's The House in the Cerulean Sea and Somewhere Beyond the Sea. This duology is one of my most favorite, if not my favorite, fantasy duology of all times. The feelings that I felt, the emotions that I felt while reading these 2 books are just like absolutely surreal. It's so heartwarming. The way that I could describe them is that they were very heartwarming books. They're very tender, cozy, obviously. They're very, very nostalgic. For some reason, I feel like I'm reading like a Disney movie or some sort of like animation movie that's like straight out of my childhood. But also the message that they have, the like implications, the ideas, the themes of these 2 books are also very, very heavy, very complex, very nuanced, and are very relevant and relatable to the current climate. And so you're gonna be feeling sadness that is not 100% sadness. And I always talk about this when I describe T.J. Klune's books and the way that he writes. But the way that he writes is very interesting. The sadness that he describes is mixed with like grief, betrayal, longing, desire, love, friendship, and all sorts of like contrasting emotions, but somehow when mixed together and when fused together in his books are just like so much more than just sadness, right? So that's the way that I could describe this book. This book follows Linus Baker, who is this like person who investigates different orphanages to see if the orphanages are up to standard, if the children are abused, if the conditions are not up to date, things like that. So he goes around this realm kind of like evaluating these orphanages. And one day he is sent to evaluate this orphanage that's like sitting right where the Cerulean Sea is. It's like at the very end of this like realm and this world that he's in, and he's met with magical children. And in this world, even though there are magical children, but the magical children are looked down upon. They're treated as inferior beings to like the human children. And so he didn't know what to expect. And also when he left his workplace, he was told to be very, very critical and to not be subjective to his personal biases and prejudices and emotions, things like that. So he was told upfront that these children are very, very evil and that he has to be careful, has to be like very strict and very critical in evaluating their conditions, right? But when he met and was introduced to all these magical beings, he felt something else. He felt love, he felt sadness for them, he felt touch, and then he started to change. And so his character work and the arcs and the developments in Linus' characters and just in Arthur as well. And Arthur is the head of this like magical orphanages. And so their stories collide. They found out that they felt something else for one another. And when he realized that in this town where the magical orphanage is located, the people in town also fall victim to these toxic, stereotypical beliefs about these magical children, and he observed firsthand how they are excluded from their own community. They are confined, they are treated not as human beings but as even animals and just like inferior beings. Linus Baker started to want to rebel, fight back. He wants to do something else to help these children, and that's where the story unfolds. And so reading about this book, it's more than just a book about love, about found family, about queer love. It's also about human rights, magical children rights, I don't know, beings rights, about equality, but also equity, and how are we supposed to treat people that are different from us. So those are everything that I could mention without giving too much away from these two books, but I think you should read this. You have to read these two books. They are just like amazing. I don't know, I'm like speechless just like thinking about these books. Each and every single one of the character, I think the children are so precious. Also, this question about nature versus nurture is very predominant throughout the entire two books, because magical children are framed to be evil, right? But are they actually evil? Even if they are evil, does the surrounding environment, does their childhood environment and conditions have an effect on helping these so-called evil children to change and become better people for society or not? So nature versus nurture. And so you're going to be having to pause a lot and think a lot critically and also emotionally with all of the topics that are mentioned in these two books by TJ Klune. Okay, I do need to hurry up because we only talk about like 2 subcategories and I'm already like 30 minutes into the video. The next series I do want to talk about when it comes to cozy fantasy is Anne of Green Gables by Montgomery. And this is, I know, a beloved series by so many different people across the entire world, and I only read the first book in the series, but I loved Anne, such a charismatic, outspoken, expressive child, and I loved her. And like I mentioned, even though this is a cozy read, a heartwarming read, the different feminist ideologies that were mentioned in this book is very, very interesting. The idea of our female children or our girls not worthy of being adopted because they will not contribute anything physically to the household. Like they're not as strong as boys, you know, they cannot do farm work, they cannot help around the house, they cannot do chores, things like that, because they are females. That question and how Anne goes about helping her foster parents understand and find their own answers to that question is very precious, but also very critical and significant. Her being such a positive and optimistic person, despite all odds, and despite her being an orphan, and despite her just like having to jump around different foster homes because nobody could truly accept her for who she is. That makes me so sad, but also so happy for her, you know? And so I recommend Anne of Green Gables. I know this is a beloved series, and I will be continuing and finishing the series because the way that it's written is very, very cozy and heartwarming, but the message behind this book is very significant. I feel like cozy fantasy makes harder topics easier to accept and comprehend and digest for people, because sometimes, you know, we don't always need to read about battle scenes and movements and, you know, people fighting and violence for us to grasp the idea and for us to fight for what is right. Sometimes you just need something that's cozy, that's gentle, that brings about the messages in a way that's very emotionally touched. That's sometimes what people need. And so cozy fantasy, because of that, I recommend reading these books. And then the last book, this is a maybe for me. This is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries. And I don't think I'm going to be continuing with the series. And I know that this is a series that people love. Some people really enjoy reading about Emily Wilde and her character work and character development and her changes throughout 3 books. I just could not bring myself to like her. She is, in my personal opinion, this is all personal opinions and preferences, she is insufferable. Don't like her. She's so selfish and she's so self-centered, egotistical. At least That's how I read about her. At least that's what the first book told me about this character. But if you like fairies, and if you like fairies with a touch of scientific research, and if you like a male protagonist that's not traditional in a way that he doesn't fall into any of the heteronormative stereotypes about sexuality, masculinity, I think you're going to really enjoy reading about Emily Wilde and her research about fairies and her dictionary glossaries about fairies and their beliefs and their ways of doings and beings and things like that. But for me, it's a no. The other cozy fantasy books that I do want to read next is Agnes Aubert's Mystical Cat Shelter. I wanted to read this book because of the cover. Do I have to say more? But I do want to read you an excerpt from the kind of the description of the book that I found on Goodreads. So, a woman who runs a cat rescue in the 1920s, Montreal, turns to a grouchy but charming wizard to help save the shelter in this heartwarming, cozy fantasy from the New York Times bestselling author of the Emily Wilde series. Okay, so this is the same author that wrote the Emily Wilde series. Okay, we'll see. Agnes Aubert leads a meticulously organized life, and she likes it that way. As the proudly type A manager of a much-needed cat rescue charity, she has devoted her life to finding forever homes for lost cats. But after she is forced to move the cat shelter, Agnes learns that her new landlord is using her charity as a front for an internationally renowned and thoroughly distributable magic shop owned by the disorganized, not to mention self-absorbed, irritating, but also decidedly handsome Havelock Renard, magician and failed dog lord. The shop draws magical clientele from around the world, partly due to the quality of Havelock's illicit goods, as well as their curiosity about his shadowy past and rumors of his incredible powers. Agnes' charity offers the perfect cover for illegal magic. Agnes couldn't care less about the shop. Magical intrigue or not, there are cats to be rescued. But when an enemy from Havelock's past surfaces, the magic shop, and more importantly, the cat shelter, are suddenly in jeopardy. To save the shelter, will Agnes have to set aside her social conscience and protect the man who once tried to bring about the apocalypse and is now trying to steal her heart? Okay, I like the sound of that. I like the sound of that. And on Goodreads, it sits at currently a 4.34 average rating. The next one I do want to read in terms of cozy fantasy is The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. MacLean. As head Phoenix Keeper at a world-renowned zoo for magical creatures, Ayla's childhood dream of conserving critically endangered firebirds seems closer than ever. There's just one glaring caveat. Her zoo's breeding program hasn't functioned for a decade. When a tragic phoenix haste sabotages the flagship initiative at a neighboring zoo, Ayla must prove her derelict facilities are fit to take the reins. But saving an entire species from extinction requires more than stellar animal handling skills, carnivorous water horses, tempestuous thunder hawks, mischievous dragons. Alias has no problem wrangling beasts, but mustering the courage to ask for help from a hotshot griffin keeper at the zoo's most popular exhibit, virtually impossible. Especially when that hotshot griffin keeper happens to be her arch-rival from college, Luciana, an annoyingly brooding and insufferable know-it-all with the face of a goddess who's convinced that Ayla's beloved phoenix would serve their cause better as an active performer rather than as a passive conservation exhibit. With the world watching and the threat of poachers looming, Ayla's success is no longer merely a matter of keeping her job. She's the keeper of the phoenix and the future of a species, and her love life now rests on her shoulders. Okay? That sounds right up my alley. And this currently sits at 3.82 ratings on Goodreads. And then finally, Avowed Inventions. This is the first book in the Immortal Desires series by Jacqueline Rodriguez. Hopefully I pronounced their last name correctly. Let's hear it. Rune Riker has nothing left to lose. Everything's been stolen by the Immortals. Her family, her home, her freedom, but she's done playing by their rules. Each year, humans are forced to journey into the Immortal immortal realms, but 20-year-old Rune orchestrates her own selection, determined to find her family and destroy anyone who stands in her way. Rune is used to doing whatever it takes to survive, and now she must endure the Forge, a cutthroat college for the immortal druid's elusive tarot magic. When Rune's magic reveals itself to be the rarest and most powerful, she must live with its only other wielder, Prince Draven. As arrogant as he is ruthlessly ambitious, he's the last person she can trust. Rune's abilities also draw the eyes of the most dangerous druids in the realms. Some want to use her, more want her dead. Draven offers to train her for a price. As Rune becomes ensnared in Draven's dangerous games, she learns there are secrets at the heart of the kingdom that some will kill to protect. And Rune and Draven's growing attraction may be the spark to ignite a brewing war. Okay, and tropes, enemies to lovers, fake dating, fake fated mates, coming of rage instead of coming of age, and there's only one bed. Okay. And this currently sits at 4.13 star ratings on Goodreads. Okay, it has more than 4,398 ratings. That's amazing. Okay, those are the next cozy fantasy reads I want to read next. Okay. Moving on to romantic fantasy. Okay, romantic fantasy. I tend to think of this genre as fantasy with a romance subplot or a romantic subplot. So romance and love is not going to be the main theme throughout the entire book and the series as a whole, but it's definitely there for some more spice and for some more, something. And the first book, I do have a copy of this book, so give me a second. I know, I do want to recommend Alchemised by SenLinYu for you. I know this is a book talk craze for a while now. I recently finished this book at the end of 2025. This is my last book of 2025, and I think I gave it a 4.75 stars, almost a 5 stars, but I still absolutely gulped this book down. It's amazing. It's like dark fantasy for sure. It's like very dark, very brutal, very, very graphic. So check the trigger warnings, and we all know that this book is inspired by the world of Harry Potter, but it's very different. When I was reading this book, I didn't even feel that there is like an inkling of resemblance between this world and that of Harry Potter, which is like props to the author, because this world is very politically layered, complex, detailed, very, very, very difficult to wrap my head around. Although the magic system, once again, is something that's very familiar, but also something that's very, very unique. This is based on necromancy and vivimancy, so working on the dead and working with the dead. This is a story about Helena. It is a story of war, of violence, of being abused, of torture, but also this is a story about hope and love among all of the tragedies, and how love can really, really pull people from opposite sides to each other. I think we all know what this book is about, so I'm not going to go into much detail about what this book entails. But the reason why I think you should read this book, I think this is a very important read, even though this is inspired, it's like made up, it's fictional, but I truly feel like this is a real war story. The way that she writes and the way that she's able to pack so many details, and we are very fortunate to be living in peacetime, at least for the most of us, but reading about this book truly brought me back inside this war that's going on between these two sides. There's no way that I could capture this book in just a couple sentences, but this is a very realistic book. I don't think the author tries to do too much. I don't think she goes overboard. I think she stays true to how realistic as possible, and that means that you're not gonna see she glossing over or sugarcoating certain things. You're not gonna see her trying to force a happy ending just for the sake of a happy ending. The happy ending is something that people tend to debate over. I think the ending is very suitable. I think the ending is very realistic for the story, for the world. The ending really adds to the complexity of it all, the sadness of it all, just like the detrimental side effects of war of it all. The ending signifies intergenerational trauma, post-war trauma, how the first generation after the war would feel straight out of this brutality. they're not gonna be okay. They're not gonna feel okay. They're not gonna feel like we all feel now, living in peacetime. They're gonna feel broken. They're gonna feel something is missing, because something is missing. You just have to read this. If you've been petrified and terrified of this book, I know it's gigantic, but please, for the love of God, just read this book. I'm glad I read this, and I will. I don't know, maybe not in the near future, but this is a book that I can't picture myself rereading. And that speaks volume of how much I love this book, because I don't reread books. I don't like to experience again what I already know. But this is something that I feel like in the second read and the third read and even the fourth read, I will learn something new every single time. I will feel something new every single time when I reread this book. So that is Alchemised by SenLinYu. And also, I forgot to mention, you can fight me, but there is a romantic subplot in Alchemised. There's no debate. The love is part of the story. So that's why I included in romantic fantasy. Okay, moving on. The next two books are by the same author, and that is M.L. Wang. The first one is The Sword of Kaigen. Once again, the love is not the main focal point of the story. This is a story about how the female protagonist realized her own power, her own dignity, her own strength, her own capabilities in standing up for herself, but also standing up against her abusive husband, standing up to protect her son and her family against this evil enemy coming in, who has more knowledge, who has more power, who is stronger, who is more united than everyone else in their country. This also is a story about propaganda, of how the country, of the government, kind of like manipulating these powerful people just for their own good, of how the propaganda is used to gloss over people's minds and eyes and prevent them from seeing the real truth and the real state of their country. Loved it. My first ever 5-star read, 6-star reads even. It's an exception to me in that I don't usually like to buy special editions of book, but for this book, I will make the exception because I cried because a certain character that I did not see passing away, passed away. Next is the same author. This is Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wang. Once again, the females in these books are badass, strong. Strong not in the sense of physically strong, but also emotionally, mentally, and spiritually strong. They are so resilient and persistent in everything. And for the female protagonist in Blood Over Bright Haven, she is the first ever high mage in this country of Sion. In this country, women are not supposed to be in positions of power. Their only place is in the house and as mothers. The fact that she becomes the first ever high mage, not even a regular mage, a high mage, working along with other men in her workplace, is history in itself. She made history just by being a high mage. But because she is the only female high mage in all of this country, when she comes to her workplace, she is met with resistance and discrimination. Truthfully so, because she's different from them, right? She's the only person. And also I feel like because the other male high mages fear her, because she's also freaking powerful. She's so powerful. But then as she works on her different projects, she realizes a secret about this world, about this country that she is serving, that completely broke everything down in terms of their mindset, her beliefs, her morals. And the question is, what choice will she make? Does she buy into the old beliefs and just keep leading a normal, unbothered life? Or does she decide to break everything down and rebuild everything from scratch? That's Blood Over Bright Haven. In terms of romantic fantasy books that I do want to read, I want to read Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I've heard lots of great things about this book, and let me read you the blurb of the book. This book is the first book in the Celestial Kingdom series by Su Lin Tan. Hopefully I pronounced their name correctly. Growing up on the moon, Xing Yun is accustomed to solitude, unaware that she is being hidden from the feared celestial emperor who exiled her mother for stealing his elixir of immortality. But when SenLinYu's magic flares and her existence is discovered, she is forced to flee her home, leaving her mother behind. Alone, powerless, and afraid, she makes her way to the celestial kingdom, a land of wonder and secrets. Disguising her identity, she seizes an opportunity to learn alongside the emperor's son, mastering archery and magic, even as passion flames between her and the prince. To save her mother, SenLinYu embarks on a perilous quest, confronting legendary creatures and vicious enemies. But when treachery looms and forbidden magic threatens the kingdom, she must challenge the ruthless celestial emperor for her dream, striking a dangerous bargain in which she is torn between losing all she loves or plunging the realm into chaos. Now it's sitting at 4.06 at 128,461 ratings. That's absolutely amazing. That's a lot of ratings for a book. Okay. The next book I do want to read is Little Thieves, and the cover of this book actually caught my eye. It looks like The Handmaid's Tale for me. Okay, let's hear the blurb. This is the first book in the Little Thieves series by Margaret Owen. Once upon a time, there was a horrible girl. Vanja Schmidt knows that no gift is freely given, not even a mother's love, and she's on the hook for one hell of a debt. Vanja, the adopted goddaughter of Death and Fortune, was Princess Giselle's dutiful servant up until a year ago. That was when Vanja's otherworldly mothers demanded a terrible price for their care, and Vanja decided to steal her future back by stealing Giselle's life for herself. The real Giselle is left a penniless nobody, while Vanja uses an enchanted string of pearls to take her place. Now, Vanja leads a lonely but lucrative double life as princess and a jewel thief, charming nobility while emptying their coffers to fund her great escape. Then one heist away from freedom, Vanja crosses the wrong god and is cursed to an untimely death, turning into jewels stone by stone for her greed. Vanja has just 2 weeks to figure out how to break her curse and make her getaway. And with a feral guardian half-god, Giselle's sinister fiancé, and an over-eager junior detective on Vanja's tail, she'll have to pull the biggest grift yet to save her own life. Okay, that sounds like a lot of disguising and manipulation and, just like disguising her own identity, which I love. Okay, we have The Spear Cuts Through Water, and I have heard nothing but great and amazing things of this book by Simon Jimenez. So here we go. This book currently sits at 4.14 star ratings on Goodreads at 24,430 ratings. The people suffer under the centuries-long rule of the Moon Throne. The royal family, the despotic emperor and his monstrous sons, the three terrors, hold the countryside in their choking grip. They bleed the land and oppress the citizens with the rightful powers they inherited from the god locked under their palace. But that god cannot be contained forever. With the aid of June, a guard broken by his guilt-stricken past, and Kima, an outcast fighting for his future, the god escapes from her royal captivity and flees from her own children, the triplet terrors who would drag her back to her unholy prison. And so it is that she embarks with her young companions on a 5-day pilgrimage in search of freedom and a way to end the Moon Throne forever. The journey ahead will be more dangerous than any of them could have imagined. Both a sweeping adventure story and an intimate exploration of identity, legacy, and the longing, The Spear Cuts Through Water is an ambitious and profound saga that would transport and transform you, and it's like nothing you've ever read before. Okay, that's amazing. Okay, last subgenre, and we're sitting at an hour of just me yapping, which is absolutely amazing. It's always surprised me how much I could speak when I didn't even know that I was capable of speaking and yapping this much. So hopefully you've grabbed yourself a long cup of tea, because this is the show, you know? Okay, the last subgenre that we have is romantasy, and we know fantasy with a big romance plot, a merge between romance and fantasy, romantasy. Okay, the first one that I have, and this is a series, and this might be a controversial take, urban fantasy, Crescent City. I really enjoy reading Crescent City. I really, really enjoyed it. It is, I know that some people, they like the Gods and Monsters, City of Gods and Monsters by Kayla Edwards. I read the first book in that quartet. I think it's finished or not. I'm not sure. I didn't like the female protagonist. She's so whiny and she's so annoying and she's so, I don't want to say stupid, but she kind of is. Yeah, I could not root for them. The male also was very selfish and egotistical. It seems like he likes her, but I don't think he likes her that much. Crescent City, on the other hand, is very, very intrigued. Very, very complex, surprisingly. It's like a very binge-worthy read. It's definitely not as like well written as like all the other books that I mentioned or like classics. It's not like classic literature, obviously. But I feel like if you're in for a good time, it's very fun. And I'm still waiting on the final book in the series. And I know each book is like gigantic, but it's gonna fly through because it's so bingey. It's so bingey. So that's Crescent City. I had to talk about Gods and Monsters series by Amber V. Nicole. I know I haven't read the last book in the series. I still have. No, it's not the last one in the series, the next book in the series. This is like a 7-book series and 4 books are out already and we have 3 left. That's why I'm kind of hesitant to read the next book, because if I read the next book, I have to wait another 1.5 years or even 2 years before the next book comes out. So please, Amber V. Nicole, you know, please do whatever you have to do and produce the next book, because I need it ASAP. But this is my 5-star romantasy series. It's so funny. It's filled with magical beings, angels, demons, magics, but also it is an enemies to lovers for sure. So they went from being friends and then to lovers and then to enemies and then back to lovers and then back to enemies. It's a mess. They're a mess. But the female protagonist, Diana, she is so badass. She's so strong. She's so fiery, like literally and figuratively, because she basically is born from the fire. She's so powerful. She's like a wyvern as well. She's so powerful. So badass. And then Liam, he literally worships the ground that she walks on and just, you know, their dynamic is just top tier. I love them. And obviously it's a fun time. It's not classic literature, but that's what you get for romantasy. It's always a fun time. And although we have been having a lot more romantasy books being produced, but I feel like they have gotten so similar to each other that there's no unique plots. But I feel like urban fantasy, like Crescent City and Gods and Monsters series, they're very unique, very, very unique. The last series in romantasy that I'm currently reading and currently gulping up and really enjoying is Lady of Darkness by Melissa K. Roehrich. Hopefully I'm pronouncing their name correctly. It's amazing. Like Scarlett and Soren, there's something else. Like the banter in the first book is so funny and so on point. They're like literally born for each other. They're meant to be together. But Scarlett is an orphan. Her mother passed away when she was very young. She never knew her father, and she was raised in this black syndicate where it's like a hub for all the most evil, the most cruel, the most malicious beings. And she is one member of the Rats of Death. She is Death's maiden, and then there's Death's shadow, and then there's Death's incarnate. And so she and her sister basically goes around killing people at orders of the assassin lord. Recently, some orphans at this black syndicate started going missing, and so she and her sisters are on a task to figure out what's going on, who kidnapped the kids, basically get the kids back, right? And then she found herself entangled in a mess of just politics of different lands, of the Fae lands and the now demolished lands of ancient powers that she didn't even know existed. And then she met this general, this hot and sexy general of the high guards of the king, and they started training with each other. She saw him training his soldiers and he's very skilled. He's a very great soldier. And so she asked him to train her. They started training. They bantered. They fell in love. Then she realized she was Fae. Not even a human. Not even human. So how did she even get to the human realms? And apparently her sisters are also not human. There you go. I'm on the second book. I finished the second book in a day. Gulped it down. I'm like onto the third book right now, which is Lady of Ashes. I'm not starting it just yet because I have other books to read, but I bet you I will be reading that book next. Okay. Some of the romantasy books I do want to read next. One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crows by Rachel Gillick. I know I haven't read that duology yet, but I can read you the blurb if you also haven't read that book yet, so that we could maybe read it together. This is the first book in the Shepherd King series by Rachel Gillick. It's currently sitting at 4.26 star ratings, and oh my god, it has over 668,514 ratings. That's wild. Okay, Elsbeth needs a monster. The monster might be her. Elsbeth Spindle needs more than luck to stay safe in the eerie, mislocked kingdom of Blunder. She needs a monster. She calls him the Nightmare, an ancient, mercurial spirit trapped in her head. He protects her. He keeps her secrets. But nothing comes for free, especially magic. When Elsbeth meets a mysterious highwayman on the forest road, her life takes a drastic turn. Thrust into the world of shadow and deception, she joins the dangerous quest to cure Blunder from the dark magic infecting it. And the highwayman, he just so happens to be the king's nephew, captain of the most dangerous man in Blunder, and guilty of high treason. Together they must gather 12 Providence cards, the keys to the cure. But as the stakes heighten and their undeniable attraction intensifies, Elspeth is forced to face her darkest secret yet. The nightmare is slowly taking over her mind, and she might not be able to stop him. Okay. I'm very intrigued. Okay, next we have Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. And once again, I know this is like a YA romantasy series, and this is like a very beloved series on Book Talk as well. It's currently sitting at 4.15 star rating and 745,099 ratings. That's absolutely crazy. This is the first book in the Letters of Enchantment series, winner for a reader's favorite young adult fantasy and science fiction. Wow, okay. After centuries of sleep, the gods are wearing again. All 18-year-old Iris Winnow wants to do is hold her family together. With a brother on the front line forced to fight on behalf of the gods now missing from the front line, and a mother drowning in her sorrows, Iris's best bet is winning the columnist promotion at the Oath Gazette. But when Iris' letters to her brother fall into the wrong hands, that of the handsome but cold Roman Kit, her rival at the paper, an unlikely magical connection forms. Expelled into the middle of the mystical war, magical typewriters in Tau, can their bond withstand the fight for the fate of mankind? And most importantly, love. Okay. And finally, we have When the Moon Hatch by Sarah A. Parker. This is the first book in the Moonfall series, and I think the second book already came out or is coming out soon. It's currently sitting at 3.99 star rating at 296,928 ratings. The creators did not expect their beloved dragons to sail skyward upon their end, to curl into balls just beyond gravity's grip, littering the sky with tombstones with moons. They certainly did not expect them to fall. As a valued elding blade of the rebellion group Fjord Duath, Rave's job is to kill, to complete others and never get caught. When a renowned bounty hunter is employed by the crown to capture a member of the Ath, Rave's world is turned upside down. Blood spills, heartbreak, and Rave finds herself at the mercy of the Guild of Nobles, a group of dual-beaded elementals who intend to turn her into a political statement. Only death will set her free. Crushed beneath a mourning weight, Can Vager took the head of a king and donned his melted crown. Now on a tireless quest to assuage the never-ebbing ache in his chest, his hunt for a moon shard lures him into the belly of Gore's notorious prison, where he stumbles upon something that rips apart his perception of reality. A shackled miracle with eyes full of rage and blood on her hands stands. The echo of past sings louder than the creators themselves, and even Rave can't ignore the truths blaring at her from her warmer, happier time. However, there's more to the song than meets the eye, and some truths that are too poisonous to swallow. Why do every book sounds right up my alley? Okay, so those are the books I want to read in the romantasy sub-genre. And that being said, has brought us to the end of the video finally. I know I've been yapping for way too long, but hopefully you enjoy just like spending time with me and us just like talking about some good fantasy books together. If you've read any of the books that I recommended, let me know. Let me know what you feel, how you thought of it. And also if you also have read all the books I want to read next, let me know if I should read them or if you have any other recommendations for me in terms of the genres and the fantasy as a whole, because fantasy is up there. Is up there on my top 3 favorite genres to read from, and I just cannot wait to read more fantasy authors and just amazing books in this genre. Okay, that being said, I'm gonna go now. I hope you enjoy watching, listening, and seeing me yap. I hope you also have been enjoying the constant uploading of my videos. I try my best to be consistent. I made a promise to myself that we're gonna be a little bit more consistent and frequent in our YouTube channel journey. Thank you for being here, and I hope you are doing well. I hope you're taking care of yourself, but also taking some time off to read and immerse yourself in the world of literature and fiction or non-fiction if you want to. I'm gonna go now. I'm gonna see you very soon with another episode, and until then, bye bye.